we're going to actually now get into participant introductions because we really do want to make this interactive and help you all get a chance to get to know each other a little bit as best we can. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so we have an interesting way to do introductions. We think we're going to start off kind of more conventionally, and then so we're going to do round robin introductions in small groups. So that'll happen next. We're going to pair you off into breakout sessions. You'll have 10 minutes to get to know each other a little bit better. And then I'm going to hand it off to two facilitators that I get to introduce in a moment. They're amazing from the Trauma Resource Institute, and they are going to walk through some concepts related to psychosocial resilience, psychological resilience, and then they're going to walk through a tree of life activity. So this tree of life activity is something we're starting here. We wanted to weave it into the early part of the process to help us with some reflection. And then we'll talk it out in some small groups, and then we'll talk it out in the larger group. We'll come back as a group. So that's what we're in for. This is for the next hour. This is what we're doing. This is all part of participant introductions, but it's a unique take on participant introductions, I suppose. All right, next slide, please. And if you're following along in the workbook, we're already at page 16 and 8 to 18. So Serena's going to walk us through how we're going to get into our breakout sessions. All right, welcome back, welcome back. All right, so sorry that probably felt too short, but guess what? We actually get to come back together in the same groups in a little while after we get through some of our amazing facilitators are going to give us a little bit of information and going to facilitate some additional group conversation. So I get to introduce two really good partners of ours. First, I'm going to introduce Magdalena Sunshine Serrano. She is an Indigenous woman of Serrano, Apache, and Tarahumara descent. Tarahumara, you have to pronounce that more correctly for me, Magdalena. She's a licensed clinical social worker with a specialty in trauma-informed treatment with Indigenous populations. She began her TRM and CRM journey in 2014 after meeting and training with Elaine Miller-Karas. So let me introduce Elaine Miller-Karas. She is a LCSW licensed clinical social worker and is a trauma therapist, author, lecturer, and consultant. She's also a radio show host and social entrepreneur. She's the founder and director of of innovation for the Trauma Resource Institute and a founding member of the International Transformational Resilience Coalition. Both of these lovely ladies have helped us before with Tribal Climate Health Project trainings. We've invited them to be part of this training to help us really facilitate this deep commitment we have to also encouraging your own personal reflection in the work of doing vulnerability, climate vulnerability. So I'm going to pass it off to them. They're going to talk about resilience in a way that we as climate practitioners don't always talk about it. And so this is a conversation around climate change, but their work is primarily in the experience of personal resilience. So we get to tie these two things together, and they're really good at that. So I'm going to hand it off to Magdalena and Elaine. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Angie. And I'm going to call Magdalena Sunshine. She's a very dear person to me, and her name is Sunshine to me. So we talked about if it was okay if I used my endearment towards her, and she said it was okay. So Sunshine and I met many years ago, as Angie has pointed out, when Magdalena Sunshine became a community resiliency model teacher. And part of the work that I've been doing globally has been coming around the world and helping people understand the mind-body connection and how organically they can be able to find their organic state of well-being, I'll say. And some people call this resilience, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. But first, I want to say how honored I am to be here. I come from Claremont, California, the traditional lands of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. And I can only say that I'm full with gratitude for being amongst all of you today. And now I will turn it over to Sunshine. I think Sunshine is here. You might have to unmute yourself. All right. Sunshine might not be here at this moment. I just want you all to know that she would share with you that she is sick today. And we knew that she might have to go back and forth because sometimes she doesn't feel as well. So when she's able to, she will come and join us, I am sure. So if we can go ahead and go to the next slide.
Good morning, Elaine. Thank you. I had a technical difficulty.
Okay. Oh, there you go, Sunshine. There you go. Okay, there you go. Go ahead and
good morning, everyone. Haminat Minuit Dami Chiak. My name is Magdalena Sunshine Serrano. I am so honored to be here with all of you. I am coming to all of you today from the ancestral lands of the Somali Chumash people. As Elaine was very gently and guardedly sharing, I found out that I had COVID this morning, so I'm having just some body breaks, but please know that I will do my best to be fully present. And I just wanted to just share that I really appreciate just the honor of being here alongside all of you for the next 2 days. And our hope is through the breakout session and as we all get to know one another, that we have the opportunity to still foster that sense of community and trust and connection. We believe that is going to be really critical to creating that sense of psychological safety and well-being. So all of us can really set a wonderful space to learn and grow together. So thank you all for allowing Elaine and I to help navigate you through the next 2 days. And thank you to Justa and her team for inviting us into the space. We're just really honored to be here.
So in terms of a beginning, we wanted to talk about and unpack the word resilience. You know, I've created 2 models, one called the trauma resiliency model, the community resiliency model. And when I first started thinking about the word resilience, like over 20 years ago, it didn't have as many meanings as has come to pass. And so we're going to unpack this a little bit, Sunshine and I, but I also want you to feel free to put into the chat what you feel your definition of resilience is. And I'm going to share a little story that actually happened in Northern Ireland. I was there a number of years ago. I actually just came back from Northern Ireland 2 weeks ago, but I have quite a community there that are bringing the models that I created to Northern Ireland, into the Belfast area because of all the conflict that they've experienced. But I was about to start a training on community resilience. And the day before the training was supposed to start, we had a dinner with many of the participants. And one of the participants came up to me and said, Elaine, I just want you to know there's a big billboard in our neighborhood. And it says, if anybody calls you resilient, run the other way, because it's really people, the government and others trying to marginalize you, and also not to do a deep listen to the needs of the community. And in terms of what we need to do to create greater well-being in mind and body health, and in community structures to make our communities stronger. So with that, I've really done, honestly, a deep dive of what does this word mean? And I've talked to really, probably at this point, thousands of people around the world asking this question, what does resilience mean to you? And I do understand that for some of you, you may feel that it has been weaponized, but yet we have so many initiatives, right? Governmental initiatives, health initiatives. I helped to start the International Transformational Resilience Coalition that focuses on the mental health well-being of communities worldwide. And so if people don't like the word, we need to talk about it from the very beginning. So if we go to the next slide, Sunshine and I will unpack part of it. And Sunshine, do you want to just say a little bit about what resilience means, and then I'll add in as well.
Sure. Would you like me to use the next slide to talk about that, the resilience zone?
Oh, well, no, why don't we wait till that? I'll go ahead
we can go backwards.
And we'll go back to that. Yeah. So basically what we want to say is Sunshine's going to be talking about a common language, and she's going to talk about the zones. And I'll talk to you about unpacking a little bit more about what this means. So to me, as I talk about this in the world, and this really doesn't only come from me, this is what people have shared with me around the world about what it means. And it is resilient individuals and communities. They have a stance of compassion and empathy. And they also acknowledge their individual and collective suffering, which includes historical, let's say, traumas, present day traumas, and the suffering that may be happening. Because if we don't do a deep listen to that, sometimes we cannot then create solutions to how we can navigate our present world to change things that we want to create for our children now and in the future. So not only do they acknowledge individual and collective suffering, but also that we can lean into individual and collective assets and strengths. And I think that's one of the most humbling things that I've seen around the world, that even when people are faced with such horror, and many of you know exactly what I'm saying, that there are also cultural traditions, practices, things that have imbued a culture of people with sacred traditions that have helped nurture them during the worst of times. But there's also something about I've learned that has to do with the organicity of well-being, and I call it embodied well-being. That it's not only when we, let's say, see a beautiful place in nature and we'll look at it and we'll say, oh, that is gorgeous, that is beautiful. But there's something that happens inside of us where, and I'm going to use words, and I'm going to talk more about this afternoon, is we have a natural inherent ability to cultivate and nurture our well-being by sensing the sensations connected to the resources and traditions and strengths that we experience in life. And that when we do that, we actually have a deeper sense of well-being. And I think that, Sunshine and I feel very strongly about these kinds of organic skills. And I don't know, Sunshine, if you want to say just even a little minute of that, about what is meant to you to learn some of these embodied skills that have contributed to what we're calling resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I love about this model, and one of the things I've shared with Elaine, is this isn't an application of Western frameworks. This is this really affirms and is much more inclusive of how we as Indigenous people live in the world. This innate knowing, often we hear this called Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous wisdom. I think of it often as my grandmother, my aunties, my ancestors whispering in my ear. And it's a sense of just being able to know how we are healing, how we are thriving, how we exist in the world. And so as Elaine was talking about it's this embodiment, this essence within us that really has allowed us to navigate the healing journey. And resilience, I started looking at the chat and seeing what you all were placing in there. And that's the other piece of this model that I think is really critical to highlight today, is that it is defined by the individual. So much of the Western framework is about symptom management, or how your clinician or provider defines your well-being. This is very different. This is about healing of self, what optimal well-being means for that individual, what that looks like in relation to family, in relation to community, in relationship to the land, the water, all things that we interact with. So this is one of the things I really, really love about the model, and that it creates space for our worldview in a much more inclusive manner.
And I think that's when you're just saying it out loud too, it's like that embodied well-being. I mean, you're expressing that in your words, because there's also an optimism and hope. Because when we look at things from that perspective, then it gives us, okay, even though there's all these difficult things that are happening, that we are also designed for well-being, and that also that well-being, when it is individual well-being, leads to family well-being and community well-being. So I don't see them as being separate, but interconnected, and they're all interwoven together. And that's why when I think about community, I think about well-being, and how do we know that when we put that pebble in the stream and those circles flow out into the river, that one pebble has created the impact. And that's like each one of us, if we create and we have well-being within ourselves, that when people are present with us, they sense our well-being. They just don't even, it's not only what we think and what we feel, but what we sense. And I think if we integrate those three aspects of our humanhood, our humanity, then it does help us show up in different ways. But I also want to just say out loud, Sunshine, I'm so glad you mentioned in chat. I know that we have a number of people here. Not everybody's putting their definitions of resilience in, but I see it's the ability to withstand, endure, and thrive. That was from Joanna. Another one, an ability to recover better than before, ability to adapt and recover, the ability to adapt to change, and how well you can thrive under tough conditions. I like to imagine a flower growing through a crack in the asphalt. The ability to adapt to the difficult situations. And if you're having difficult issues, I don't think this is a definition, but there will be lunch in the future, and hopefully you'll be able to figure that one out, Kim. So persistence of occupation and locational fidelity. Oh my goodness, they're so good. Reminds me of the healing forest from Red Road to Wellbrighty. Ability to endure and thrive.
If I can speak to that one.
Yes, please. Yes.
So she's referencing Don Cuevas's Red Road, and absolutely. So I'm a fire starter trained in that model. Yes, I would definitely say what that line you're drawing is absolutely why I love this model, because it creates that same framework. So whoever drew that connection, it is definitely in alignment with, I think, Elaine's worldview.
Oh, thank you, Sunshine, and thank you for that contribution. Resilience is to acknowledge our past, including trauma, abuse, shame, and still be surviving. Oh, Nikki, I love that. And I love that integration, it's not about avoidance. And I think sometimes people think that. And also, when we think about, one person said to me, I get so upset when people say bounce back. And I said, well, tell me more about that. And they said, well, bounce back to what? The poverty, the racism I've experienced. I want to be able to thrive. And I think that you've said that beautifully, the surviving and the thriving that can happen even in spite of some of the things that we've had endured in life. So that's unpacking where Sunshine and I are starting from, and all the things that you have added to that. And you may unpack that even more, but I think that when we're working so much with the word resilience, that it really is important to unpack it, because it has been weaponized towards many people in our culture, and that is something to think about. So what we're going to do now, if we're going to go, Magdalena, if you can, Sunshine can go into and just explaining the resilient zone and the second high-low zone, and then I'll introduce the activity. So if we can go to the next slide.
Perfect.
Next slide.
So as we say, we're going to cultivate a common language. And if you can, so the resilient zone, or the zone of well-being, is very much what all of our sharing, right? This could be your resiliency forest. This could be an adaptation of medicine wheel, how we see and view our well-being. And I really want to just kind of give us that common language. So the resilient zone, if we could click one more time. The resilient zone is not necessarily a state of perfection, or where everything is perfect. We are living in the world, and it acknowledges that there is both a high zone and a low zone. So within that, we sort of have this bandwidth, and it's different for each person, right? So when you look at this image and you see this sort of wave, that looks like life. Sometimes that looks like a really colorful day. That may look like a week. That may be a month. What I like to highlight is that as it expands, we define that, and we have those days where we feel really stretched, but we seem to have that capacity to just kind of maneuver and navigate. Those are days where our resilient zone may be a little wider. Then there are days where we're exhausted, we're hungry, we're just not in that same space, and our resilient zone may be a little bit, tighter. The hope, though, is that within that framework that we leave space for the ebbs and the flows. I think the slide is, if we can maybe click it, we're losing a few pieces of that slide. Elaine, do you see that?
Just keep clicking it. Click it again. I think there's about 3 more clicks. So, okay, one more time. And okay, and then one more time after depression. There you go. Now you've got the whole thing.
Perfect. Right, now everyone can get on the same page. So as a clinician, something I really love is the way that this is framed. So rather than saying, oh my goodness, you know, you're having episode or pathologizing or even weaponizing language, this language is much more encompassing, much more inclusive. And so rather than identifying someone as, oh, you know, you're really in a bad place, it's more like, hey, I'm noticing you're stuck in a high zone. So you might have a little bit extra energy. I'm noticing, you know, that you might be experiencing pain, or really just helping them to name their state as opposed to creating a sense of it's a problem. So alongside and honoring someone's experience. So as you can see, this is where we're talking about being in the high zone. In the low zone, that would be what we historically heard people say is like depression, sadness, isolation, fatigue. Rather than saying this is a permanent place, or you know, really calling this a state, we're just honoring that it is a space that someone is in. So something that they can recover from, something that they can adapt to, something that they can revive and return to a state of thriving. What I also like is the imagery that Elaine has shown to really use this as an educational tool. Some of this is very universal. We've chatted this in different spaces and talked about this much like a river, moving through ebbs and flows, really going from high zone, low zone, can also be going from high tide to low tide. These are things that naturally move. I don't know, Elaine, if you had thoughts around also other pieces as you've adapted this in other communities.
Well, I just want to say that this is the human condition, and it's non-pejorative, it's not negative. It's that we all can be in our go into our high zone sometimes. We can all be in our low zone. But if we get stuck there, it's problematic. And some of us have gotten stuck there. But there's ways to move, to find, you know, that piece of the river that has something that you can float on that gets you through things. And so we'll be talking more about some of these themes as we go through our day today, and as we end the day with some of the other neuroscientific concepts that are underlying what Sunshine has brought to you. Thank you, Sunshine. So I'm going to introduce now.
And the other piece I would just highlight is.
Go ahead.
Is the language of really, I know everyone here is looking for those opportunities to take things back, borrowing that high zone and low zone. You know, having highs and lows is such a powerful language to be able to take back within our own communities.
And I'm going to also encourage people to think about if they like this kind of languaging, that we've worked with many tribes throughout the country, and many tribes have just contextualized this into the language of their tribes. And so I always encourage that, to make that their own in terms of this very simple way to describe these kind of states that we all go through as humans. All right. Now we have to move in. I know we're a little behind. So Serena and Angie, we're going to go through this right now. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about the Tree of Life and get you started on this exercise. So our objective here is to recognize and reflect on your values, your abilities and goals, so you can talk about the impacts of your climate change work, not only presently, but to the future, in ways that we hope that can offer hope and healing. If we would have been in person, we would have had crayons and paper for you to draw your tree of life. And you can still do that, but we also have in the workbook, in the pages, let's see, what pages are they? Pages 16 through 18, that you can go to, and you can do a narrative of this. It doesn't have to be a drawing. I have to say that I've done this similar exercise throughout the world after many kind of natural human-made disasters, climate-made disasters. And it has been a very powerful exercise, because there is something about drawing that's different than writing. And it's not about your drawing expertise. It's about what happens to us when we put a visual representation about what our answers are to the questions that we're inviting you to answer. So the Tree of Life experience is adapted to our community. The efforts to respond to climate change is in the written narrative or the visual metaphor in which the different parts of a tree represents. Our perspectives about the many ways we are engaged as a community with the challenges of climate change, and identifying the nourishing ways we can respond to this worldwide crisis in our communities. The purpose of the questions invite you to explore important themes throughout the next 2 days. And we'll have times during the 2 days to unpack some of the ideas that have come forth from this exploration. So we hope that you will discover and perhaps rediscover aspects of yourself and your community that can inspire ways to cultivate your tree of life as this metaphor to reflect the past, present, and future. So, we think about trees and what they symbolize. They have many essential elements, including permanence, longevity. If it has a firm base, it symbolizes the concepts of roots and ongoing relationship with our natural surroundings. So we hope this experience helps to unfold our continued journey. And Ryan, I think, put into, when he mentioned his definition of resilience, it is not a singular state. This is a journey that we see as it goes through our lives and the lives of our earth. And hopefully this can be a truthful reflection of what has happened, what is happening, and the great potential of what can happen. So with that, we have the first questions, and you'll see that they're on the slide. There's 7 altogether that will be integrated into the next 2 days, but we're gonna start with you exploring roots, ground, and trunk. So your roots, culture, location, core value. What is your purpose rooted in when advocating for a climate just future? The ground, tribe, community you are serving. What is the relationship with the land provided? What is the tribe community experiencing because of climate change? And your trunk, your role in serving the tribe community. What connects you to the work? What brings you the courage and strength to perform the work? So now we will invite you to spend some time in this exploration. And again, you can go to page 16 to 18 to get started. And we are giving, I believe, 15 minutes for this exercise. Is that correct, Nancy? I believe that's what we said. Is that right?
Let's give everyone until 10:10. And then as a reminder, we will meet back into our small groups that you met with before afterwards to kind of debrief on this.
Okay. And to know that if you can't get through it, all the questions by 10:10, this is also a work in progress. You can work on this when we're not in meeting to continue to kind of to pull out, to really think and reflect about some of these issues.
It's really an
Magdalena, you're
opportunity
muted.
for everyone to start building their toolkit.
Sorry, we just couldn't hear you. You're okay.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Just to highlight again what Elaine is saying is that this really gives everyone an opportunity to start building their take-home toolkit. And so often in these 2 days, this is the only time we have that protected time to really think, to really reflect, to really focus on our own feelings. So we really encourage you to focus on the process, not necessarily the product. And as Elaine said, taking those moments to capture these ideas that come forward throughout the next 2 days.
Thank you. All right, so we'll let everyone go off and spend some time filling out these first 3 prompts or however far you get. And we're just gonna play a little bit of background music and we'll meet you back at 10:10. Thank you.